Okay, opening up here and wow, immediately any amount of subtlety is right out the window. This child is literally behind bars, so in case you're wondering if they live in a nice place, the answer is no. And if you're wondering if The Promised Neverland, produced by Cloverworks, is any good, the answer is, well, it's not looking great. I am by no means the type of person who criticizes an adaptation for every little thing, that it changes from the source material. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I prefer when creative liberties are taken in order to capitalize on the advantages of the change in mediums. Tom Bombadil would have padded out the already lengthy film that is The Fellowship of the Ring. I'm okay with neither adaptation of Stephen King's It having that infamous child orgy scene. Netflix's Death Note is pretty good. The anime adaptation of the hit Shonen Jump series by Kai Shirai and Posaka Demizu joins a long list of manga making the transition from stills to animation in a way that takes little advantage of the newfound medium. Jumping back to the kids, they go over the basics of the world in an awkward info dump, exchanging lines in a way that doesn't just answer the characters' questions, but crosses a line to start directly addressing the viewers. Then Emma has the line where she recalls Mother's warning, so she kind of knew where they were from the start. With the foreboding, echoing music and cynical Ray calling Mother's advice an obvious lie, the subtlety is not there at all. And if by this point you haven't gotten it, Norman asks the big question. I wonder what this gate is protecting us from. Yes, we get it. The gate isn't actually here to protect the children. Listen, the manga isn't particularly subtle either, but it instead starts off with the kids playing in an idyllic field and then Emma going through her daily routine. Opposite of the anime, the manga begins by establishing a setting to be subverted. They have a loving mother figure and eat tasty food. They play around and look so happy to be there. Then a panel or two at a time, the security of the situation is undercut. First, the ID number tattoos on their necks. This information is delivered surrounded by smiles, creating juxtaposition. That yeah, this is real weird for the reader, but everything else seems so wonderful, so the kids are none the wiser. There's also the matter of the testing, which visibly causes stress, but afterwards Mother praises them for their hard work and they get to play even more. It is only then, 25 pages in, do we get the temptations of the outside world and the shot of a child's face behind bars. Through marketing or word of mouth, you probably know that not all is well in this world, but you likely don't know exactly what unless you were informed prior. The anime, meanwhile, is very obvious that these kids are being held captive. I'm not particularly bothered by spoilers, but I accept that many are. Upon episodes 1 airing, there was ample discussion in the anime community about not spoiling folks. That those of us who have been reading the manga or got a chance to watch ASAP should respect people who haven't. Fair enough, but honestly, the show spoils itself. Within the first minute, and even moments after the OP wraps up, there's the ID numbers. Some smiling faces offset this, kind of, but with everything else going on, it's too tough to buy. This is all followed up by a shadow-covered calendar where the date circled is labeled Connie, and just in case you forget, there will be cuts to the ID numbers every few minutes with sinister music, followed up by more of that shadowy calendar, not even 3 minutes later. And people are constantly reminding us who Connie is. This is all within like the first 5 minutes. The show is just bombarding us with the same obvious information over and over. But the ID numbers, let's get back to those. Because let's not pretend like we don't know what's going on here. There are two major things that come to mind when we see people given such markings. Firstly, that they're branded like cattle. Secondly, Holocaust victims with the same markings, which wraps back around to the first notion because many soldiers who liberated such places describe the tattooing as being branded like cattle. This isn't to say if you know what's coming then it won't be enjoyable. My whole point in favor of being less fussy about spoilers is exactly that. It's the craftsmanship around it which has the greatest value, and to that effect, this is serviceable, decent, competent. In these one-episode tests, I focus on shot composition, color palette, cuts, and more technical aspects because it's that which makes up the bulk of any anime. Plot is such a fraction which we have very limited understanding of early on. Good direction, visual storytelling, character designs, that stuff tends to stay at a relatively similar level of quality from start to finish, which is why I sound so down here. I like the manga a fair deal. I only started a few months ago, but it's fun in a sort of dark and edgy way that the mental chess game being played is also compelling. The exact stuff that made me love Death Note years ago. This is less of an adaptation as I see such a process, and more of a replication. While all of these choices undercut what should be an unsettling atmosphere, the most peculiar bits come during the game of tag. Norman chases Emma across a normal-looking forest. Then this. Just a giant pocket watch in the middle of the woods. It's not physically there, of course. It's supposed to be conveying how much better Emma is than the other kids, considering she's outlasting them. But why does it look like it's actually in these environments? Why not have it faded out, or sliding across the screen? Give it some effects to make it not look so attached to the surrounding world. Then at the 11:40 mark comes a series of strange cuts. As a girl starts talking about not receiving letters from anyone on the outside, which brings up the question of how these kids know about letters, and why an organization that is trying to keep them in the dark from the day they are born even teach them about such a thing. I digress though, because this is an issue with the manga too. But to this cut.
さ、全然届かないよね、手紙。手紙？ほら、ハウスを出て行って誰一人よこさないじゃない。そりゃ。
What was that? The cut looks like there was supposed to be another couple seconds of Emma's face, but we're jerked away before she even says one full word. This happens several times through this scene, and I have no idea what the motivation is, but the result is that it looks amateurish. This is something I occasionally screw up, but I'm a dude making videos in his room for less than $100 a month. Shortly after comes the big twist. Connie, the adorable girl set to leave, forgets her stuffed bunny, so Emma and Norman go to return it. They come to the forbidden gate, finding a truck within the tunnel. In the back of that truck, though, lies Connie, dead, with flowers blooming from her corpse. This all falls rather flat. We get a stock standard disturbed anime face. The creatures arrive with some really mediocre voice direction. Look at these things and imagine what their voices sound like. Probably some eldritch horror, maybe some real phlegm and gravel to their voices. Nope, they just sound like average dudes. It's not as if there aren't bright spots in the voice acting. The choice of Maria Issei to play Rei is a great casting. She's Killua in Hunter x Hunter if you don't know, and being that he's an intelligent but pragmatic kid who comes off as heartless, that is exactly Rei's character. Over the next several minutes, the show really tries to sell how traumatizing this is with the most standard of shots, with art that has no imagination to it. These are not one-for-one replicas of the panels from the manga, but they're close. Where the show could play around with coloring, camera angles, pans, and, animation, it doesn't. Only a lot of shots that are nearly stills. This bothers me not merely because I enjoy the manga and would like to see a good adaptation bring more people in, but because I love horror. In any medium, it's one of my favorite genres, and it permeates through so many places we wouldn't suspect it on top of the obvious spots. Through animation, we bear witness to visuals that simply could not happen in live action. Experimentation only made possible through things like Madoka Magica, Devilman Crybaby, Attack on Titan, and Made in Abyss. How those shows play around with their visual direction in moments of horror. Or how when even non-genre entries, such as March Comes In Like a Lion, does the same to convey elements of horror in isolation, depression, abuse, and bullying. How Hunter x Hunter does that too with the Chimera Ants, or the sinister relationship Hisoka has with Gon and Killua. What does The Promised Neverland do different? Nothing. It's standard stuff. Clearly talented people work on this show. If your friend said they drew something and they wanted your feedback, then showed you this, you'd say, wow, this is really good. But in an industry full of people who are more than capable of drawing something that looks like The Promised Neverland, we should want more. The brief moment that almost, and I'm saying this generously, captures that sense of exceptionalism happens in the final minute, but Mom has the stock standard disturbed anime face with the same art style we've seen all episode. It's a quick moment of the show saying, there's hope that these kids can make it, then tearing that security away, but 60 seconds in a 24-minute runtime isn't much. At this point, I don't expect to keep up with The Promised Neverland. It's fine, just fine. In no way, shape, or form do I see any reason to not just continue reading the manga, which I have my issues with, but I can confidently say is the best version of a promising property. And trust me, I already know the comments some of you want to make, that I'm cynical or need to turn my brain off, but welcome to Analytical AniTube, my sweet summer child. All I'm hoping for here is for the anime community to start expecting better, to not settle for competent. As always, you can donate to my Patreon to ensure these videos keep on coming. If you do so, your name will pop up in the credits like these fine folk, and for just $1 you get access to some bonus posts. But also liking, subscribing, all that good stuff is always very much appreciated.